A controversial case in China began when a beautiful dance teacher suddenly died during class. Her body was taken to the morgue to be preserved and cremated. However, an employee working there had bad intentions when he saw her body. He committed a wrongful act right at the morgue. What was even more frightening was that while he was doing this, the woman's body suddenly woke up. This miraculous revival raised the question of whether he was a sex offender or a hero who saved the girl from death. Hello. Welcome to Unmasked. At around 10 p.m. on August 19, 2016, some employees working at the Nanjing City Funeral Home office were packing up their work to prepare to leave. Suddenly, they heard a man scream coming from the direction of the morgue. Although the morgue was more than 200 meters away from where they worked, they could still feel the extreme terror in the man's screams. They hurriedly ran in that direction and saw the man also running towards them in panic. He kept stumbling as he ran, as if he didn't feel pain or there was something that scared him more than the pain from the falls. When they got closer, they discovered that it was Lee, a patrol officer working there. Lee was naked, not a single piece of clothing covering his body. His limbs were scratched in many places. A large tear on his forehead. Blood was flowing out, covering one eye. His mouth was gasping for breath, unable to speak. Everyone didn't understand what had happened to Lee that made him so scared that he ran away and fell down like that. They helped Lee sit up, reassuring him to calm down. He kept pointing in the direction of the morgue, stammering, "There's a ghost! There's a ghost!" Some of them boldly went to the morgue to check what was going on. When they opened the door and stepped inside, they were surprised to find that the bed where body number 3 was lying was moving. They cautiously moved closer and were even more surprised to see that body number 3 was trying to sit up. One of them, an elderly man, used the flashlight from his phone to look at body number 3 to get a closer look. It was a girl, or rather the body of a girl, who had been brought into this morgue at 5 p.m. The light made the girl's eyes squint, her voice weak. "Where is this?" Although they could not believe what was happening before their eyes, somehow this body had miraculously revived. They immediately contacted the hospital to report the incident. Thanks to medical care, it did not take long for the girl to regain consciousness and become aware of what was happening around her. Although her body was still very weak and she had to stay in the emergency room for further observation, she insisted on calling the police to report that she had been sexually assaulted. That night, the police in Nanjing City, Jiangsu Province received a strange call. The person who reported the incident said that she had been sexually assaulted at the funeral home. This incident made the police very upset because the funeral home is a sacred place for the deceased. Who could do such a thing in such a place? The police quickly arrived at the scene of the incident after hearing the report from the girl and some people present at the scene. Through initial investigation, the police identified the suspect as Lee, the man who had been running and screaming a few hours earlier. Lee was taken to the city police station that night to take a statement. He quickly admitted to the crime, seemingly still in shock over what had happened tonight. The woman in the morgue was Rose Mi, 24 years old, a beautiful and passionate dance teacher. Rose Mi focused on teaching children dances and always devoted herself to her work. On the morning of August 19, 2016, while teaching the children, Rose Mi suddenly felt unwell. Her vision went dark, and she collapsed unconscious. This incident caused the children to panic, and her colleagues immediately took her to the hospital and informed her parents. After receiving the news that their daughter had fainted at work, Rose Mi's parents rushed to the hospital. The doctor concluded that Rose Mi had died from overwork and signed the death certificate. This news was like a bolt from the blue, which Rose Mi's parents could not accept. They were immersed in the pain of losing their daughter, crying in the hospital. Although the doctors tried to comfort her, they still advised Roseme's parents to arrange the funeral as soon as possible. Although she was sad, Roseme's mother understood that her daughter loved beauty, so she changed Roseme into the outfit that Rose loved the most when she was alive. She also meticulously put on makeup for her. She hoped that her daughter would leave in the most beautiful image. Seeing her daughter lying peacefully after being carefully made up, her mother was somewhat comforted. Since the cremation was scheduled for the next day, Roseme's body was temporarily placed in the preservation room. On the evening of the incident, Lee was assigned to patrol and guard the morgue. Lee usually worked the night shift from 8 p.m. the night before to 6 a.m. the next day. The reason he had to work all night was because there had been a number of cases of organ theft recently. As usual, Lee went to check on the corpses that had been brought into the morgue that afternoon. When he checked the stretcher carrying Rose's body, after removing the white cover, he stopped and looked at it for a long time. Although the girl was dead, her face still exuded a charming beauty. Her body was completely intact, without a single scratch, looking like she was sleeping peacefully. Lee suddenly reached out to touch the corpse's face. The girl's skin was soft, cool, and not as cold as he had thought. In a moment, he secretly thought, "If I could marry this beautiful girl, I would have no regrets in my life." After a long while standing in a daze next to Rose's body, Lee suddenly shivered from the cold air of the morgue. It turned out that he had been standing there for too long. Lee covered the body with a white cloth and laughed at himself for having such strange thoughts. He went outside to smoke a cigarette to warm himself up and thought endlessly about how different human life could be. It was only 9 o'clock at night, but the space around the funeral home was deserted and quiet to the point of desolation. Lee sat alone with a cigarette that was always lit. The hazy smoke made him forget the boredom of his current life. Lee was 34 years old this year, had no wife or children, and no ambitions. He had been doing this job at this funeral home for more than 3 years. This was the longest period of time he had worked. He told himself that God had created this job just for him. He didn't like noisy places, he didn't like communicating or arguing with others. Here, among people who had no breath, left him feeling like a king. He smiled to himself, because the king lacked a queen. Suddenly, the beautiful face of the girl lying there appeared in his mind. The blood in his body seemed to flow faster, his heart beat faster. He imagined a soft and cool place that could soothe the burning, tense thing inside him. And he returned to the morgue and committed depraved acts with Rose's body. After satisfying his lust, he rested his head on Rose's shoulder for quite a while. A feeling of guilt and remorse surrounded his thoughts. He suddenly felt creepy, as if someone was looking at him. He raised his head, glanced at Rose's delicate face. He was suddenly speechless, startled with fear. The dead woman's eyes were wide open, staring at him. In that moment of extreme fear, his limbs felt numb. His mind was dizzy, as if he was in a terrible nightmare. Suddenly, the woman's body whispered in the quiet night, "What are you doing to me? Where is this?" The voice made Lee feel cold. He was startled and fell to the ground. He struggled to get up. His legs tangled together, but he still rushed out instinctively with a loud scream. And the next incident happened, as we presented at the beginning of the case. As for Rose, she was declared dead, but why was she revived at that time? In fact, she was confirmed to have no more signs of life. After much research and in-depth investigation from the medical team and experts, they revealed the hidden truth behind this mystery. It turned out that Roseme had fallen into an extremely rare state of clinical death. During the dance class, due to the strong and fast-paced movements, her body consumed a lot of energy, leading to a temporary lack of oxygen to the brain. In this extreme situation, the human heart rate and pulse can seriously decrease, even stop working. During this period, she actually fell into a state of clinical death. However, what brought Rosemary back to life was Lee's wrongdoing. Although Lee's actions were condemnable, in this special situation, his actions unintentionally created a physical impact, causing the blood in Rosemary's body to circulate again, helping the brain to be supplied with oxygen. Thanks to that, she began to breathe and gradually regained consciousness. At first, Rosemary thought she was just going to work normally, but unexpectedly experienced such a real near-death experience. She woke up in an extremely awkward situation, a completely unfamiliar cold space, and a strange man lying on top of her. Even though she was aware that she was being sexually assaulted, she was completely helpless to do anything. It took a long time for Rose to be able to speak. It was her question, in a voice as weak as a moan in the night, that terrified Lee so much. Rosemary could not help but shudder at the thought that if she had not woken up in time, she could have been sent straight to the crematorium. That consequence was something she did not dare to think about. Although Rosemary was indeed the victim of Lee's rape, the irony was that his actions had inadvertently saved her life. After careful consideration, Rose and her family decided not to pursue Lee's rape. However, Rosemary's family's decision did not mean that Lee's actions were completely innocent. Law and morality always have their own standards of evaluation. Lee's actions clearly violated the law and infringed on the dignity and rights of others. Rosemary's family's tolerance stemmed from humanity and personal considerations. But that did not change the nature and consequences of Lee's actions. Although Rosemary's family expressed forgiveness, in order to protect justice, the People's Court still decided to prosecute Lee according to the law. Lee was very upset, justifying that his actions did not constitute rape because in his mind, it was just a corpse that had been declared dead. He did not think that it was within the scope of rape. This defense showed that Lee had a serious lack of moral concepts and legal knowledge. Because of his introverted personality, lack of communication, and the nature of his work, Lee had difficulty finding a suitable partner. Prolonged loneliness and lack of affection gradually distorted Lee's psychology, causing unhealthy desires and eventually leading to this shocking incident. At the trial, the judges determined that Lee's actions did indeed constitute the crime of insulting a dead body, but there was not enough legal sanction to constitute rape. This statement caused a lot of controversy in public opinion at that time. Lee's lawyer argued that because Rosemary had been declared dead at the time of the incident, Lee's actions were committed on the body of a dead person, so he could only be convicted of violating a corpse. Moreover, the victim's family had withdrawn the complaint, so only an administrative fine and 6 months of suspended imprisonment with mandatory probation should be applied to Lee. This view made the trial process more complicated because this was an unprecedented case. In fact, the law did not have specific regulations on this situation. If we think from another perspective, Lee's wrongdoing accidentally led to Rosemary's resurrection. If this had not happened, perhaps Rosemary would have been cremated and her life would have ended. Therefore, although Lee's original intention was wrong, objectively speaking, his actions saved Rosemary's life. Ultimately, after careful consideration, the court determined that Lee had committed the crime of desecrating a corpse, which constitutes the crime of desecrating a corpse under the law. However, objectively, this action saved Rosemary's life, and her family also expressed forgiveness, so the court decided to reduce the sentence. The final result was that Lee was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Although the case has been legally concluded, the debate in society has not yet subsided. The community has many conflicting views on the incident. Some people believe that although Lee's actions were wrong, he saved Rosemary's life, and therefore should be considered for his crimes, even thanked. Some even suggested that Rosemary and Lee should get married to perfectly resolve the matter. However, the law always leans towards justice and fairness. The first focus is still Lee's act of desecrating a corpse. This is an undeniable crime. Although saving a life is an objective fact, it cannot be a reason for Lee to be exempted from legal responsibility. The law not only guarantees the principles of justice, but also has humanitarian concerns. Therefore, the reduction of Lee's sentence during sentencing reflects the consideration of justice and humanity. This spirit has been expressed in the judgment, but it does not mean that Lee's behavior is tolerated or taken lightly. This decision is a comprehensive consideration of law and sentiment. However, many people online still firmly believe that Lee's behavior has seriously violated social morality and crossed the boundary of the law. Not only does this act violate the body, it also tramples on the dignity of women and should be severely punished instead of being reduced. Although the case has been legally concluded, the reflections and debates in society on this issue have not stopped. This incident also exposed other dangers that cannot be ignored. Rose Mee was not actually dead, but was mistakenly taken to the funeral home. This reflects a serious medical error. Without timely resuscitation, a young life could have been unjustly taken away. The hospital cannot avoid responsibility in this incident. As for funeral homes, it is urgent to improve and standardize operations. Rose Mee's resurrection is a lucky case, but most of the deceased no longer have the opportunity to speak out. We do not know whether there is any violation or disrespect of the body in unsupervised places like this. Funeral homes should be places for the deceased to rest in reverence and dignity, a solemn place for fallen leaves to return to their roots. We must resolutely oppose all forms of violation of the body to ensure that the rest and dignity of the deceased are not harmed. This is not only respect for the deceased, but also upholding social morality and the boundaries of the law. So what do you think about this case? Please leave your opinion in the comments section. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and see you in the next videos.